Your resume seems embellished, the interviewer said dismissively. I doubt you've actually handled major accounts like these. My chest tightened as 15 years of hard work were brushed aside with a single sentence. The weight of my dwindling bank account pressed down as I sat straighter. Every achievement listed is genuine, I said quietly. The market expansion strategy I developed. Anyone can write numbers on paper. The interviewer cut me off with a thin smile. Without backing from a prestigious firm, these claims are questionable at best. 8 months ago, I was directing projects across 5 countries until new ownership pushed out experienced women for their inner circle. Now, I was on my 73rd interview, facing the same wall of doubt. The interviewer tapped my resume with a pen. This client portfolio seems particularly far-fetched. The side door swung open. A person in an expensive suit walked in, stopped mid-stride, and stared at me. "It's you," they exclaimed with genuine warmth. "The miracle worker who saved us last year. When every consultant said our product line was doomed, your strategy completely turned things around." The interviewer's mouth opened slightly. "That's precisely why I'm here today," the client continued. "We want to triple our investment with your firm. Is she joining your team? Because that would seal the deal immediately." Before I continue this incredible story, I need you to know something. Have you ever been underestimated? Ever had someone look at you and decide your worth before you even spoke? If you felt that burn of injustice, you'll want to stay until the very end, because what happens next changed not just my life, but an entire industry. My name is Aviva Renault. At 42, I had built my career in international market strategy from nothing. Growing up in a small Midwestern town where girls were expected to marry young and stay close to home, I'd defied expectations by working 3 jobs to put myself through business school. My analytical mind, combined with genuine empathy for consumer needs, had become my professional signature. I'd cultivated the ability to see patterns others missed and translate those insights into profitable strategies. But sitting in that interview room at TGR Advisory, none of that seemed to matter to Philomena Oswald, the chief talent officer whose pencil-thin eyebrows had remained raised throughout our entire conversation. After the client, Elias Bowen, CEO of one of North America's fastest-growing consumer goods companies, left the room, Philomena's entire demeanor transformed. Her rigid posture softened. The critical edge in her voice disappeared. "Well, this is certainly unexpected," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Elias is notoriously difficult to impress. Tell me more about how you worked with his company." I took a measured breath. I designed their Southeast Asian market entry strategy last year. Their previous consultants had recommended against expansion, citing cultural barriers. But I identified specific regional opportunities they'd overlooked. Philomena nodded enthusiastically, as if she hadn't spent the previous 20 minutes questioning my capabilities. Fascinating. And the results? 37% growth in their first 2 quarters, outperforming initial projections by double digits. "Impressive," she said, scribbling notes. "We should accelerate your application. In fact, given your experience, we might consider you for our senior director position. The compensation would be quite generous." The whiplash from contempt to courtship gave me emotional vertigo. Just moments ago, she had practically called me a liar. "The position requires someone who commands respect," she continued, oblivious to the irony. "Someone with gravitas." I watched her rewrite our shared reality in real time. The dismissive interviewer was gone. In her place sat an enthusiastic advocate who'd recognized my potential immediately. As she outlined next steps, my mind drifted back to 8 months earlier. I'd been executive strategy director at Crest Innovations when a venture capital firm acquired us. The new CEO, Preston, had called me to his office on a Tuesday morning. "Aviva, your track record is stellar," he'd said while examining his cuticles, "but we're implementing a more aggressive growth model requiring different leadership chemistry." Translation: the boys' club was closing ranks. Within 6 weeks, all 5 female directors were replaced by men from Preston's network. Most had less experience, but the right energy for the new vision. My severance package was generous, designed to prevent lawsuits rather than honor contribution. At first, I'd been confident. With my experience and results, Finding a new position seemed inevitable. But 73 interviews later, I'd encountered countless versions of Philomena, people who couldn't reconcile my achievements with their perception of who should have achieved them. We could have an offer prepared by tomorrow, Philomena was saying now. I'll just need to confer with the executive team, but after Elias's endorsement, it's practically a formality. I looked at her, noting how her earlier contempt had vanished completely. That's quite a shift in perspective, I said carefully. She laughed lightly. Well, Elias is our highest billing client. His opinion carries significant weight. And my extensive experience didn't? Her smile faltered. I hope you understand that we have to be thorough in our vetting process. Many candidates exaggerate their thoughts. You weren't being thorough, I interrupted quietly. You decided I was unqualified the moment I walked in. That's not true, she protested, color rising in her cheeks. I was simply asking challenging questions. You called my achievements far-fetched and questionable. Those weren't questions, they were accusations. Philomena straightened papers that didn't need straightening. Perhaps there was a miscommunication, but what matters now is that we're very interested in bringing you on board. I gathered my portfolio slowly. I appreciate that. When can I expect to hear about next steps? Her relief was palpable. I'll call you personally by tomorrow afternoon. As promised, Philomena called the next day with an offer significantly above the advertised salary range. I requested the weekend to consider it, which she granted enthusiastically. That weekend changed everything. Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen counter staring at the offer letter. The compensation would solve my immediate financial concerns, but something felt wrong. I thought about all the qualified people, particularly women over 40, who'd been dismissed without an Elias to champion them. My phone chimed with a message from Nishtha Dar, my former colleague from Crest Innovations. We'd been meeting monthly for coffee since the acquisition. Still on for tomorrow? Have news, her text read. The next morning at our usual cafe, Nishtha radiated excitement. At 56, she had an energy that belied her age and wisdom that reflected her 3 decades in business intelligence. I've been consulting with 3 former Crest clients, she revealed. They all asked the same thing. Why isn't there a firm that combines data intelligence with cultural insight? The big firms have the numbers but miss the human element. I nodded, remembering how often our recommendations at Crest had been challenged by executives who couldn't see beyond spreadsheets. So, I've been thinking, Nishtha continued, leaning forward. What if we created that firm? You, me, maybe bring in Yara for her digital expertise. Yara Okonkwo had been our digital transformation lead at Crest, another casualty of the acquisition. You mean start our own company? I asked. Exactly. Between us, we have contacts across 4 continents. My severance is still intact, and I'm guessing yours is too. I pulled out the TGR offer letter and slid it across the table. Nishtha scanned it and whistled. Impressive figure, but your face tells me you're not thrilled. The interviewer spent 20 minutes telling me my experience wasn't credible until their client walked in and recognized me. And now they're desperate to hire you, Nishtha said, understanding immediately. Classic. If I take this job, I'm entering another company where my value is determined by who validates me, not what I've accomplished. Nishtha handed back the letter. So what's your alternative? For the first time in months, energy surged through me. Maybe you just suggested it. Over the next 3 hours, we sketched the outline of what would become Prism Strategies. Our vision: a consultancy specializing in markets the big firms considered challenging, regions they typically approached with Western-centric models that missed crucial cultural nuances. By Monday morning, I had drafted a respectful decline to TGR and scheduled calls with Yara and 2 other former colleagues who'd been sidelined during the Crest acquisition. Philomena's response came within minutes of my email. This is disappointing. Perhaps we can increase the compensation package? Elias specifically asked about you this morning. I replied that my decision wasn't about money, thanked her for her time, and closed my laptop with a finality that felt liberating. The first 6 months of building Prism were the most challenging and rewarding of my career. Nishtha, Yara, and I pooled our severance packages as startup capital. We worked from Nishtha's converted garage, using our industry connections to secure initial meetings. Our first breakthrough came unexpectedly. Damon Reeves, a mid-level manager at a consumer electronics company, had been in one of my workshops years earlier. He reached out after hearing I'd started a new venture. My team has been pushing for Southeast Asian expansion, but our consultants say the markets aren't ready, he explained. I remembered how you approached similar challenges. Would you consider providing an alternative assessment? The project budget was modest, but the opportunity was perfect. We spent 3 weeks developing a comprehensive analysis that identified specific entry points overlooked by traditional metrics. When we presented our findings, the room's energy shifted from skepticism to excitement. 2 vice presidents who hadn't been scheduled to attend showed up midway through. This is exactly what we've been trying to articulate, one said afterward. You've quantified the opportunity while addressing the cultural complexities. That single project led to 3 referrals, each slightly larger than the last. By month 4, we had hired 2 analysts and moved into a small office space. Then came the industry conference that would change everything. The annual Global Market Summit was the premier gathering for our industry. Normally, a startup like Prism wouldn't have warranted attention, but Yara had previously chaired the technology panel and leveraged that connection to secure us a small presentation slot on the secondary stage. Our topic, Invisible Markets, Identifying Overlooked Growth Opportunities, wasn't designed to be provocative. We simply presented case studies showing how traditional assessment models systematically undervalued certain regions and demographics. What we didn't know was that Elias Bowen would be in our audience. When the Q&A began, Elias stood up. Your methodology challenges everything the major firms have been telling my board. How confident are you in these projections? I recognized him immediately, but maintained my professional composure. Our models have consistently outperformed traditional projections by 23 to 41% in these markets. We have the data to support every assertion we've made today. You certainly do, he said with a smile. Your strategy transformed our business last year. I'm curious why you're not with TGR now. I specifically recommended you to them. The room grew quiet. TGR was one of the conference's major sponsors, with their CEO scheduled to deliver the next day's keynote. I decided to pursue a different opportunity, I replied diplomatically. Elias nodded thoughtfully. Well, their loss is apparently significant. My team would like to hear more about your current work. Are you taking new clients? Selectively, I answered. The buzz began immediately after our session. Attendees who had skipped our presentation requested private meetings. Industry reporters who had been focused on the major firms suddenly wanted Prism's perspective. But the most significant moment came that evening at the networking reception. I was speaking with a potential client when I noticed Philomena Oswald watching me from across the room. Beside her stood TGR's CEO, Gerard Walsh, his expression tense as Elias approached me with purpose. Aviva, Elias called, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. I've spoken with our board. We want to transition our entire APAC strategy work to Prism. Philomena's face drained of color. That's a substantial portfolio, I said, aware of the attention we were attracting. Worth every penny based on your previous results, Elias replied. Besides, we've been dissatisfied with our current consultant's limited vision. I felt Philomena's stare intensify as she whispered urgently to Gerard. We'd be honored to discuss the opportunity, I said professionally. Excellent. And fair warning. I've already mentioned your firm to several colleagues from other companies. Expect some calls. As Elias walked away, Gerard and Philomena immediately intercepted him. Their conversation appeared tense, with Elias shaking his head repeatedly. Later that evening, Gerard approached me at the bar. Aviva, isn't it? Gerard Walsh, CEO of TGR. I understand there was some confusion during your interview process with us. No confusion, I replied evenly. Your talent officer made her assessment quite clear until Elias changed her mind. Gerard winced slightly. Sometimes our processes don't properly identify exceptional talent. I'd like to personally apologize and explore whether there might still be a fit between your expertise and our organization. I met his gaze directly. That's kind of you, but Prism is my focus now. Perhaps a strategic partnership then? Your boutique approach combined with our global resources could be powerful. Before I could respond, Nishtha appeared at my side. Sorry to interrupt, but our next appointment has arrived. No such appointment existed, but her timing was perfect. Of course, I said, turning back to Gerard. It was nice meeting you. The conference marked a turning point for Prism. Within 3 months, we had secured contracts with 7 major clients, including Elias's company. Our team grew to 17 people, each hired not just for their technical skills, but for their diverse perspectives and experiences. If you're enjoying this story so far, I want you to hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell, because we share these real-life business revenge stories weekly. Stories about underestimated professionals who completely transform industries after being dismissed. Your support helps us bring more of these authentic experiences to light. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because the real revenge was just beginning. Our rapid growth necessitated a larger workspace. We found a light-filled office in a converted warehouse district. Nothing extravagant, but with room to expand. I insisted our conference room have glass walls facing the main work area. Transparency would be literal at Prism, not just a buzzword on a mission statement. 6 months after the conference, our client roster had tripled. We'd expanded to 28 team members, each bringing unique perspectives shaped by diverse experiences. When most firms sought graduates from the same 5 universities, we discovered brilliant minds from schools no one in our industry recruited from. Vera, our research director, who'd been rejected by 12 major firms despite her groundbreaking market prediction models, revamped our entire analytical framework. Milo, a 60-year-old former teacher who'd gotten his business degree after 30 years in education, brought psychological insights that transformed our client communications strategy. What made our approach revolutionary wasn't just our diverse hiring, it was our methodology. Traditional firms filtered all market data through established Western economic models. We inverted the process, examining markets through local cultural contexts first, then applying economic analysis. The results consistently outperformed industry standards by staggering margins. One Tuesday morning, 13 months after founding Prism, Yara burst into my office, waving her tablet. "You need to see this," she said, placing it before me. The industry newsletter headline read, "TGR launches new division, Horizon Markets." The article detailed how TGR was creating a specialized unit focused on undervalued international markets with unique cultural considerations, nearly identical language to Prism's marketing materials. "They're copying our entire model," Yara said, crossing her arms. I skimmed the article, and guess who's heading the division? Who? Philomena Oswald. Yara's eyes widened. The same woman who said your experience wasn't credible? The very same. Later that day, Nishtha discovered something even more concerning. TGR had scheduled meetings with 3 of our biggest clients, offering similar services at significantly reduced rates. "They're undercutting us by 30%, Nishtha reported. "They can afford to operate at a loss to capture market share." I leaned back in my chair, considering our options. They can copy our approach and undercut our prices, but they can't replicate our team or thinking. Let's accelerate development of the assessment framework. The framework Nishtha and I had been developing was our most innovative creation yet, a talent assessment model that identified overlooked potential in job candidates by evaluating skills through scenario-based challenges rather than traditional credentials. "It's still in beta," Nishtha cautioned. "Then we'll refine it faster. This isn't just about business anymore. It's about proving our entire philosophy works." Over the next 3 weeks, we worked relentlessly to perfect the framework. When we finally tested it with a client's hiring team, the results were beyond even our expectations. The system identified exceptional candidates who had been previously filtered out by conventional screening methods. Our client, the innovation director at a technology company, was astonished. These candidates would never have made it past our initial screening. Their backgrounds don't fit our usual pattern. "That's precisely the point," I explained. "Excellence doesn't follow a single pattern." Word spread quickly. While TGR focused on copying our market analysis approach, we shifted the conversation entirely. Instead of just helping companies find overlooked markets, we now help them find overlooked talent to develop those markets. 2 months later, we received an unexpected email from Darian Winters, TGR's Director of Client Services, requesting a meeting. Curious about their intentions, I agreed. Darian arrived precisely on time, impeccably dressed and visibly uncomfortable. After brief pleasantries, he got straight to the point. TGR would like to discuss the possibility of acquiring Prism strategies, he said. Our board believes there could be significant synergies between our organizations. I kept my expression neutral despite my surprise. That's an interesting proposition. May I ask what prompted this interest? Your growth has been remarkable, he replied carefully. Your methodologies, particularly your talent assessment framework, have generated considerable attention in the industry. The same methodologies TGR is currently attempting to duplicate? He shifted in his seat. There may have been some parallel development, but our leadership recognizes that your team has a unique approach that would be valuable to our organization. I see. And who proposed this acquisition? It was a board-level decision, he said, avoiding my gaze. Gerard Walsh is personally interested in discussing terms with you. I nodded slowly. Please tell Gerard I'm open to a conversation. However, I'd like the initial meeting to include whoever will be overseeing integration, should an acquisition move forward. That would be Philomena Oswald, Darian said. She's now our Executive Vice President of Strategy and Integration. I smiled. Perfect. Please set up the meeting at your earliest convenience. After Darian left, Yara and Nishtha peppered me with questions. Are you actually considering selling to them? Yara asked incredulously. I'm considering hearing what they have to say, I replied. Nishtha studied my expression. You have something in mind. Let's just say I'm curious about how Philomena will approach this meeting. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at TGR's headquarters. I arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied by Nishtha and our recently hired legal counsel, Imani. The receptionist guided us to a large conference room, where Gerard Walsh greeted us warmly, while Philomena stood slightly behind him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Aviva, wonderful to meet again, Gerard said. Thank you for considering our proposal. Thank you for your interest in Prism, I replied. I believe you know Nishtha Dar, my co-founder and chief intelligence officer, and this is Imani Okeke, our general counsel. After introductions, we settled around the table. I noticed Philomena had positioned herself directly across from me. Before we begin, I said, I'd like to understand TGR's vision for Prism post-acquisition, specifically how you see our methodologies and team integrating with your existing structure. Gerard nodded to Philomena, who straightened her posture before speaking. We envision Prism becoming our innovation hub, she said smoothly. Your methodologies would be scaled across our global operations, while your core team would lead knowledge transfer to our existing departments. And our talent assessment framework, the one that identifies overlooked candidates? A fascinating initiative, Philomena replied, though we'd need to align it with our established recruitment parameters to ensure quality consistency. I noted how carefully she avoided acknowledging the framework's purpose, to challenge those very established parameters. Could you elaborate on what you mean by quality consistency? I asked. She smiled tightly. TGR has built its reputation on a certain caliber of professional. While we appreciate fresh perspectives, we must maintain the standards our clients expect. Interesting, I said. And who would oversee this alignment process? My division would handle integration, Philomena replied. We'd work closely with your team during transition, though ultimately all hiring decisions would follow TGR's established protocols. Gerard jumped in. We're prepared to make a very generous offer, Aviva. Your team would receive significant retention bonuses, and you personally would have a senior leadership position. Reporting to? I asked. Philomena would be your direct supervisor, Gerard said. As EVP of Strategy and Integration, she oversees all specialized divisions. I nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for clarifying. Before discussing numbers, I'd like to share something with you. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. This is a time-lapse visualization of market performance for clients who've implemented our recommendations over the past 18 months compared to industry averages. The animation showed dramatic outperformance across multiple sectors and regions. Both Gerard and Philomena leaned forward, their expressions revealing genuine surprise at the magnitude of the differences. These results aren't just marginally better, I continued. They represent fundamental shifts in how these companies approach market development. Impressive, Gerard murmured. Now, I'd like to show you something else. I switched to a different visualization. This represents the demographic and experiential diversity of teams that achieved these results compared to industry norms. The contrast was striking. Prism's methodology had assembled teams that looked nothing like the homogeneous groups typically found in consulting firms. Our success isn't despite our different approach to talent. It's because of it. I explained. We don't succeed by making everyone fit the same mold. We succeed by finding people whose unique perspectives reveal opportunities others miss. Philomena's expression tightened. While diversity initiatives are certainly important, TGR has specific standards that ensure client confidence. Are those the same standards that led you to dismiss my experience as far-fetched during our interview? I asked quietly. The room went silent. Gerard glanced at Philomena with raised eyebrows. I think there's been a misunderstanding about that interaction, Philomena said carefully. There's no misunderstanding, I replied. You decided my achievements weren't credible until a client validated them. And now you want to apply those same flawed judgments to my entire team. Gerard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the financial aspects of the potential acquisition. Actually, I said, I have a counter-proposal. I opened a folder and slid documents across the table. These are our terms for considering an acquisition. Gerard scanned the first page, his eyebrows rising. This is unconventional. So is our company? I replied. Philomena frowned as she read. This stipulates that Prism would operate as an independent division with complete autonomy over hiring and methodology. Correct, I said. And this section, Gerard continued, requires the creation of a new department dedicated to inclusive hiring practices, with authority to review and override standard recruitment processes. Also correct. Philomena's voice turned cold. This effectively dismantles our entire talent acquisition approach. It transforms it, I corrected, based on proven results. And you would personally oversee this department? Gerard asked, reaching the final page. Yes, with full executive authority and direct board reporting. Philomena placed the document down carefully. This is completely unacceptable. You're essentially demanding control over how TGR hires across the entire organization. I'm proposing a system that identifies excellence wherever it exists, I replied calmly, something your current approach consistently fails to do. Gerard looked troubled. Aviva, while your results are impressive, this goes far beyond a standard acquisition. You approached us because our different perspective creates exceptional value, I said. If you want that value, you need to embrace what makes it possible. We need to discuss this internally, Gerard said, gathering the papers. Of course, I replied. We'll await your response. 3 days later, Darian called to request another meeting. This time, Gerard arrived alone. Your conditions have created quite a stir, he said after we settled in my office. Philomena was strongly opposed. I'm not surprised. But our board reviewed your performance data, he continued. The results are undeniable. They've authorized me to continue negotiations with some modifications to your terms. He presented a counter-proposal that preserved most of my core requirements but reduced the scope of the talent department's authority and extended the implementation timeline. This represents significant change for TGR, Gerard explained. The board needs reassurance that these new approaches will be implemented responsibly. And Philomena's position on this? I asked. Gerard hesitated. She's expressed reservations but will support the board's decision. Over the next 2 weeks, we negotiated final terms. The agreement maintained my requirement for an independent, inclusive talent department with significant authority. The implementation timeline was extended, but with clear benchmarks to ensure progress. 1 month later, we announced the acquisition. The industry press covered it extensively, particularly the unconventional structure that preserved Prism's autonomy while transforming TGR's approach to talent. On my first official day at TGR headquarters, I arrived early to prepare for the all-hands meeting where Gerard would introduce me and announce the new talent initiative. As I arranged my presentation materials, Philomena entered the room. "Congratulations on your new position," she said coolly. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm looking forward to working together." She gave a thin smile. "I want to be clear about something. I may have been wrong about you specifically, but TGR's standards exist for good reasons. Not everyone who claims exceptional abilities actually possesses them." "I agree completely," I said. "That's why my department will focus on evidence-based assessment rather than assumptions. Just remember that client confidence depends on maintaining certain professional expectations." "Like dismissing candidates based on first impressions?" I asked. Her expression hardened. "I've been in this industry for 20 years. My judgment of talent has built this company's reputation." "Then you'll appreciate that good systems improve with new data," I replied. "The data shows your judgment has missed extraordinary talent. My job is to fix that gap. We'll see how the board feels after 6 months of your experiments." "They're not experiments," I corrected her. "They're proven methodologies. But you're right about one thing. The results will speak for themselves." As executives and staff filled the auditorium an hour later, I stood beside Gerard at the side of the stage. Philomena sat in the front row, her expression carefully neutral. Gerard's introduction was brief but enthusiastic. When I took the podium, I surveyed the room of nearly 300 employees, noting their varying expressions from curiosity to skepticism. "Many of you are wondering why TGR acquired Prism," I began, "and why a company our size would demand such unconventional terms. The answer is simple: because excellence doesn't always look like what we expect." I advanced to my first slide, showing the same performance data I'd shared with Gerard and Philomena. These results weren't achieved by following traditional methods. They came from questioning assumptions about which markets matter, which strategies work, and most importantly, which people have valuable insights. I clicked to the next slide, showing side-by-side comparisons of traditional recruitment profiles versus the diverse backgrounds of Prism's top performers. The talent acquisition initiative I'll be leading isn't about lowering standards. It's about recognizing that we've been measuring the wrong things. We've confused credentials with capability, pedigree with potential. From the front row, Philomena watched with a tight expression. In the coming months, every hiring manager will learn new assessment techniques that identify excellence in unexpected places. Every rejection will require specific, evidence-based documentation explaining why the candidate couldn't perform the actual job functions. I paused, making eye contact with various people throughout the room. Some of you may be uncomfortable with this change. That's natural. But I'm not here to replace TGR's culture with Prism's. I'm here to help this company recognize talent it's been programmed to overlook, talent that will drive unprecedented growth. As the presentation concluded and applause filled the room, I noticed Philomena slip out a side door. Our confrontation was far from over, but the transformation had officially begun. The following weeks brought expected resistance. Several senior managers complained that the new assessment requirements were burdensome and unnecessary. Philomena quietly supported their objections in management meetings. But everything changed 6 weeks later when our first cohort of new hires, all selected through the Inclusive Talent Framework, completed their initial projects. Their results outperformed traditional hires by measurable margins across every department. At the quarterly board meeting, I presented these outcomes alongside projections for continued improvement. The data was unambiguous. Identifying overlooked talent wasn't just morally right. It created competitive advantage. After my presentation, one board member turned to Philomena. "Why haven't we been hiring this way all along?" She had no answer. 3 months after that, TGR's client satisfaction scores reached their highest levels in company history. Our new approach to talent had transformed not just who we hired, but how we served clients. The most satisfying moment came 1 year after the acquisition. I was working late when Philomena appeared in my office doorway. Do you have a minute? She asked, her usual confidence noticeably absent. Of course, I replied, gesturing to a chair. She sat down carefully. The Eastern Europe expansion project. The team you assembled. They identified opportunities no one else saw. They did excellent work. I agreed. One of the analysts, Teresa. I rejected her application twice before your system flagged her potential. Philomena paused. She's brilliant. Yes, she is. Philomena looked down at her hands. I've been reviewing all the candidates I rejected over the past 5 years who were later hired through your department. The pattern is disturbing. In what way? I consistently dismissed people who didn't fit a certain profile, regardless of their capabilities. She met my eyes directly, including you. I waited, letting her continue. I need to ask you something, she said. When you proposed this acquisition, was it always about changing how we identify talent? Was that your actual goal? I considered my answer carefully. When you dismissed my experience that day, you weren't just rejecting me. You were reinforcing a system that consistently overlooks certain kinds of excellence. My goal wasn't to become your boss or prove you wrong. It was to ensure that system couldn't keep hurting people with valuable contributions to make. Philomena nodded slowly. I've requested a transfer to lead our Asia-Pacific division, she said. Before I go, I wanted you to know that I understand now what you were trying to accomplish. As she stood to leave, I said, Philomena? She turned. Excellence comes in many forms, including the ability to recognize when our judgment needs recalibration. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps that's the most important skill of all. 2 years after founding Prism, what began as my personal quest for validation had transformed an entire industry. TGR's inclusive talent approach became the new standard, with competitors scrambling to replicate our results. The consulting world, long dominated by narrow definitions of excellence, was opening to voices and perspectives previously excluded. My revenge wasn't in humiliating Philomena or taking her position. It was in systematically dismantling the arbitrary barriers that let mediocre gatekeepers decide who deserves opportunity, ensuring they could never again dismiss someone like me. Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might inspire others facing similar challenges. And if you found value in this journey of transformation against all odds, please hit that like button and subscribe. Every week we bring you real stories of professional redemption that prove success is the best revenge. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, and let us know what industry's gatekeepers need to be challenged next. The phone's harsh ring jolted me from feverish sleep. 2:38 a.m. My thermometer had read 102 degrees earlier that evening. COVID had ravaged my body for days, leaving me barely able to breathe without coughing. The room spun as I fumbled for my phone. Hello? My voice cracked, throat feeling like sandpaper. Leonora. My boss Genevieve's voice sliced through the line with surgical precision. No concern for my health. No preamble. You're fired. Your projects and office space are reassigned. Goodbye. The words should have devastated me. 3 years of dedication, countless all-nighters, innovative campaigns that transformed the company, all discarded in a middle-of-the-night call while I was battling an illness that had killed millions. But instead, a strange calm washed over me. Okay, I replied simply. A pause. What do you mean, okay? Confusion had replaced her confident tone. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh that triggered a coughing fit. What's so funny? She demanded. Through labored breathing, I managed to respond. Nothing, Genevieve. You just don't realize what you've done. Are you threatening me? Her voice pitched higher. Not at all. Just observing. Goodbye, Genevieve. I hung up, still smiling despite my fever. The projects she'd just claimed, the ones she thought would advance her career, were actually elaborate traps she had unwittingly set for herself. And she had just stepped right into them. If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. That moment when someone you trusted reveals their true colors. Stay with me as this story unfolds. I promise the ending will be worth every minute of your time. If you're enjoying these true stories of justice served, take a second to like and subscribe so you never miss our next upload. My name is Leonora Devereaux. Before that nighttime call, I was the associate creative director at one of the top marketing firms in the country. I had built a reputation for developing unconventional campaigns that connected with audiences on a visceral level. My work had won awards and brought in millions for our clients. What I lacked in corporate politics skills, I made up for with raw creative talent. Let me take you back to how it all began. 3 years earlier, I'd arrived at the firm fresh from a smaller agency, buzzing with ideas and the drive to make them reality. Genevieve Weston had personally recruited me, gushing about my portfolio and promising I'd have creative freedom to push boundaries. "Your campaigns speak to people in ways others can't achieve," she told me during our first meeting. "That's what we need here." For the first 6 months, she was my biggest cheerleader. She'd showcase my concepts to clients, nodding enthusiastically as I explained my vision. The leadership team seemed impressed, and I felt I'd found my professional home. Then came the Ashton account, a struggling luxury watch brand needing reinvention. I developed a campaign focusing on time as a witness to life's most intimate moments rather than a status symbol. It was risky, emotional, and nothing like their previous marketing. The campaign launched. Sales increased by 42% in the first quarter. The industry took notice. Award nominations rolled in. That's when I first noticed the shift. During the celebration dinner, our CEO raised a glass to Genevieve's brilliant vision for Ashton. She stood, basking in applause. When I conceived this approach, I knew it would resonate with a younger demographic. I sat stunned, my congratulatory smile freezing on my face. Not once did she mention my name or contribution. Later that night, I confronted her outside the restaurant. "I worked around the clock on that campaign, Genevieve. You didn't even acknowledge me." She adjusted her coat, not meeting my eyes. "Don't be so sensitive, Leonora. This is how business works. We're a team. The important thing is the company succeeds." "A team where you take all the credit?" Her expression hardened. "You're still new here. I've spent 15 years building my reputation. When you reach my level, you'll understand how this game is played." I should have left then, but the work challenged me. The pay was good, and the health insurance covered my mother's experimental cancer treatments. Without it, she'd have no options left. So I stayed, telling myself things would improve. They didn't. The pattern became clear. I'd develop strategies and concepts. Then Genevieve would mysteriously need a quick review just before presentations. She'd walk into meetings with my work, making tiny modifications and presenting it as her collaborative vision. Client success? Genevieve's strategic genius. Campaign failures? Leonora's execution missed the mark. My salary remained frozen while hers grew with each success. My success. Promotions that should have been mine went to others who played her political games better. Meanwhile, my ideas continued generating millions. I documented everything. Every email, every meeting, every concept. Not for revenge, just protection. Or so I told myself. Then came the breaking point. 12 months ago, our largest client threatened to leave unless we delivered revolutionary work. Genevieve called me into her office. "We need something no one's done before," she said, tension visible around her eyes. "The CEO specifically asked for you to lead this." I felt a flicker of vindication. Finally, recognition. "But," she continued, "I'll need to closely supervise. The stakes are too high for experiments." Translation: I would do the work. She would take the credit. I developed a campaign that broke every convention in the industry. It was personal, almost uncomfortably intimate, yet universal. The client loved it. Sales skyrocketed beyond projections. At the industry awards, Genevieve stood on stage accepting the top honor. "I've always believed in taking risks," she said, clutching the trophy. "This campaign represents everything I've worked toward in my career." My name appeared in small print on a slide that flashed for 3 seconds. That night, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to leave. That would be too easy for her. I wasn't going to complain. That would paint me as difficult. Instead, I decided to play a longer game. I began speaking up more in meetings, ensuring others heard my ideas firsthand. I built relationships with clients directly. I found ways to sign my work that couldn't be erased. Hidden creative elements that carried my signature-style clients began to recognize. Genevieve noticed. Her methods became more aggressive. 6 months ago, she assigned me 3 enormous client projects simultaneously, each with impossible deadlines. The message was clear: fail and prove you're not essential. Succeed and work yourself to exhaustion while she collected the praise. I accepted the challenge without complaint. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment. I poured everything into these projects, creating strategies that broke new ground. The clients were thrilled with the preliminary presentations. The plans were innovative, forward-thinking, and, if implemented exactly as written, subtly problematic. That's when I recognized her true game. These weren't just tough assignments. They were calculated snares. The strategies, if executed as she demanded, would skirt industry regulations in ways that wouldn't be obvious immediately but would create serious consequences months later. By then, she'd have ensured all evidence pointed to me as the responsible party. I quietly built alternative, completely legal versions of each campaign. I launched these clean versions while creating a paper trail showing Genevieve's explicit push for the problematic approaches. I saved emails where she insisted on pushing boundaries and being aggressive. I noted each time she removed protective measures or compliance steps I'd included. "We don't need all these disclaimers," she'd say, deleting sections of my work. "They dilute the message." I'd save both versions. When I fell ill with COVID, I worried my careful planning would unravel. I was bedridden, struggling to breathe, let alone work. But as days passed and my fever raged, I realized Genevieve might see my illness as an opportunity. With me absent, she could claim complete ownership of the successful campaigns while positioning me to take the fall when regulators eventually noticed the issues. I was right. 2 weeks into my illness, colleagues started acting strange during our video calls. Messages went unanswered. Projects were rerouted without explanation. Then came that middle-of-the-night call. As I lay in bed after hanging up, I felt an odd sense of peace despite my illness. I had prepared for this moment meticulously. Genevieve thought she was cutting me loose before I became a liability. In reality, she was walking into a trap of her own making. The next morning, between coughing fits, I sent 3 emails. The first went to our internal compliance team, expressing concerns about certain directives I'd received regarding the 3 major campaigns. The second went to the board of directors, detailing my contributions and attaching documentation of Genevieve's instructions to circumvent regulations. The third went to my personal lawyer, outlining potential wrongful termination and documenting the systematic credit theft I'd experienced. Then I waited, focusing on recovering my health. The COVID symptoms gradually subsided, leaving me weak but clear-headed. For days, silence from the company. I wondered if my evidence had been dismissed, if Genevieve's influence was too strong. A week after my firing, my phone rang. It was Preston, the head of the board. "Leonora, we need to talk." His voice was grave. My heart raced. Had my plan backfired? "We've reviewed your documentation," he continued, "and we've spoken with the clients directly. There are discrepancies between what we've been told and what actually happened." I said nothing, letting silence do the work. "The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow. We'd like you to attend." I took a deep breath. I'm still recovering from COVID, Preston. The illness Genevieve knew about when she fired me at nearly 3 in the morning. A heavy sigh from his end. "Yes, that's part of what we need to discuss. Can you join virtually?" "I'll be there." That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Years of being overlooked, of having my work stolen, of being positioned as expendable. It was all coming to a head. The next morning, I logged into the video call 10 minutes early. One by one, serious faces populated my screen. Genevieve joined last, her expression confident until she saw me. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why is she here?" Preston cleared his throat. "Genevieve, please. We have serious matters to discuss." For the next hour, I watched as my careful documentation was presented. emails where Genevieve explicitly pushed for questionable tactics, recordings of meetings where she dismissed compliance concerns, side-by-side comparisons of what she'd presented to the board versus what had actually been implemented. Most damning were the testimonials from clients, confirming I had been the creative force behind the campaigns, not Genevieve. Her face went from confident to confused to panicked as the evidence mounted. "This is ridiculous," she finally sputtered. "She's manipulating you. I've given 15 years to this company." Preston's expression remained stone cold. "And in those 15 years, how many others' work have you claimed as your own, Genevieve?" The question hung in the air. Genevieve's eyes darted around the screen, seeking allies and finding none. "We'll need your resignation by end of day," Preston continued. "The legal team will be in touch regarding the client complaints." "You can't do this," she whispered, but the fight had left her voice. After she disconnected, Preston turned to me. "Leonora, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. We failed in our oversight. We should have seen what was happening." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the victory surging through me. "We'd like to offer you Genevieve's position, effective immediately. Your work has been exceptional, and your integrity in implementing compliant campaigns despite pressure speaks volumes." The offer was everything I'd worked toward: recognition, power, vindication. But as I opened my mouth to accept, I hesitated. This was the moment I should feel triumph, yet something felt incomplete. The company that had allowed this to happen for years was suddenly sorry, only after they feared legal repercussions. "I appreciate the offer, Preston," I said carefully, "but I need time to consider it. My priorities have shifted during my illness." His surprise was visible. "Of course. Take the time you need. The offer stands." After the call ended, I sat in silence, processing. The revenge I'd orchestrated had worked perfectly. Genevieve was exposed and removed. I was offered her position, yet I felt hollow. Was becoming the next Genevieve really what I wanted? Or was there something more important than climbing a corporate ladder built on taking credit for others' work? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How did it go, honey?" I looked at her message, thinking about how close I'd come to losing her, how the company's health insurance had saved her life, how precious time truly was. That's when I realized the best revenge wouldn't be taking Genevieve's job. It would be creating something entirely new, something that would make both Genevieve and the company irrelevant. I picked up my phone and called Preston back, but not to accept his offer. I had something much bigger in mind. "Preston," I said when he answered, "I've made my decision. But first, let me tell you about an idea I've been developing." My plan wasn't just about justice for myself. It was about transforming an industry built on stealing credit and crushing creativity. "I'm declining your offer," I told Preston. His sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. "But I have a different proposition." "Leonora, I understand you're upset, but this position comes with substantial—" "I don't want Genevieve's job," I interrupted. "I want to change how this entire industry works." Over the next hour, I outlined my vision. A new agency model built on transparent attribution, fair compensation tied directly to revenue generation, and collaborative leadership. No more stolen ideas. No more hidden contributions. Our industry talks about innovation while clinging to a hierarchy designed in the 1950s, I explained. Clients are tired of paying premium rates for work done by underpaid juniors while executives take credit. Preston remained silent as I detailed my proposal. I would stay only if the board agreed to pilot my new division, one operating under completely different rules. Each team member would receive clear credit for their contributions, and compensation would be directly tied to the success of their work. "You're essentially asking us to cannibalize our own business model," Preston finally said. "I'm asking you to evolve before someone else makes you obsolete." The silence stretched until Preston sighed. "Present it to the full board next week. I can't promise anything. That's all I ask." For the next 7 days, I poured my recovering energy into my presentation. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creating something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. The board meeting arrived. 12 stern faces watched as I outlined my vision. complete with financial projections showing how transparency could actually increase profitability by improving talent retention and client trust. "Miss Devereaux," said Imani, the oldest board member, "while intriguing, your proposal undermines decades of established practice." "With respect," I countered, "those established practices are why we lose our best talent every 18 months. It's why clients grow suspicious of our billing. It's why Genevieve could steal credit for years without anyone noticing." That last point landed hard. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Give me 6 months to prove this model works?" I pressed. "A small team, 3 clients, complete autonomy. If I fail, you've lost little. If I succeed, you'll be positioned as industry pioneers." The debate lasted hours. Finally, Preston called for a vote. 7-5 in favor of my proposal. A narrow victory, but enough. "Congratulations, Leonora," Preston said afterward. "You have your division. Don't make us regret this." I smiled. "I won't." This was my true revenge beginning to take shape. Not destroying Genevieve, but making her irrelevant. Creating something she could never have built because she was too busy stealing instead of innovating. Within weeks, I assembled a team of 5 people, all talented individuals who had left the industry disillusioned after experiences similar to mine. Together, we developed our operating principles and target client list. Our first prospective client was Delia, marketing director at a mid-sized tech company. She'd worked with traditional agencies for years and was notoriously demanding. "Your model sounds idealistic," she said during our pitch, skepticism evident. "But this industry runs on relationships and executive oversight. How can junior people possibly deliver without strict management?" "That assumption is exactly why agencies waste your money," I explained. "The junior people already do the work. We're just removing the unnecessary layers that take credit and drive up costs." She leaned forward. "Prove it. I'll give you our smallest product line. Show me results in 3 months." We accepted the challenge. Every team member took ownership of specific elements, their names clearly attached to their contributions. We established transparent pricing that showed exactly what each component cost and who was doing the work. Our first campaign launched 6 weeks later. The results were immediate. Engagement metrics 40% above Delia's targets. 2 weeks after that, she called, "I need to meet. Today." My stomach tightened. Had something gone wrong? Had our experiment failed already? That afternoon, I sat across from Delia, trying to read her expression. "I showed your model and results to my CEO," she began slowly. He had questions. "I'm happy to address any concerns," I offered, preparing for criticism. His main question was, "Can you handle our entire brand portfolio?" I blinked, processing her words. "Your entire portfolio?" She nodded. "Your team delivered better results with half the budget of our main agency. More importantly, I always know exactly who's working on what and why decisions are made. No more mysterious charges or executives taking credit for junior work." This was it, our first major validation. And not just a client, but a significant one whose business would establish our division as viable. "We'd need to grow our team," I said, mind racing. "But yes, we can handle it." Delia smiled. "Good, because I've already recommended you to 2 other companies. They'll be calling this week." News travels fast in our industry. Within 2 months, we had 7 clients. By month 4, we'd grown to 15 team members. Our transparent model was resonating with clients tired of traditional agency games. The original board members who had voted against me watched in stunned silence as our division's revenue grew. Preston, to his credit, became our strongest advocate. "This is the future," he declared during a company-wide meeting, as I presented our division's results. "Leonora has shown us a better way forward." Seeing my name and contribution acknowledged publicly felt like water after years in the desert, but the true satisfaction came from watching my team receive the same recognition. Then came the industry conference, the same one where Genevieve had accepted an award for my work a year earlier. Our division was nominated for innovation in business practices. As I prepared my acceptance speech, ever optimistic, my assistant rushed in. "Leonora, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. On screen was an announcement. Genevieve had launched her own agency, claiming to pioneer a revolutionary, transparent model of credit and compensation. My blood boiled. Even now, she was stealing my ideas. I scrolled further, reading the details of her announcement. Her version was a pale imitation, surface-level transparency with the same old power structures beneath. She didn't understand the fundamental principles that made our model work because she'd never created anything herself. Should we respond? My assistant asked. I considered it for a moment, then handed back her phone. No, the market will sort this out. That evening at the awards ceremony, I felt a familiar tension as they announced the innovation category. The spotlight landed on our table as they called our name. Standing at the podium, looking out at the industry that had nearly broken me, I felt a strange calm. This award belongs to every person whose ideas were stolen. I began. Every creative who watched someone else take credit for their work. Every junior who was told to wait their turn while their contributions powered someone else's promotion. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Our model works not because it's noble, but because it's honest. Talent flows to places where it's valued. Clients stay where they trust the process. It's simply better business. I spotted Genevieve in the crowd, her expression unreadable. To those attempting to copy our approach, transparency isn't a marketing tactic. It's a complete reinvention of how we work, reward, and create. You can't fake it. Our eyes met briefly across the room. She looked away first. After the ceremony, an industry reporter cornered me. Rumor has it, Genevieve Weston started her company using your ideas again. Care to comment? I smiled. I'm focused on building something new, not reliving the past. So you won't address her claims that she developed this model years ago but wasn't allowed to implement it at your former company? I nearly laughed. The beautiful thing about our model is that every idea has clear documentation of its origin. The truth is easily verified. The reporter raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning I wish her well, but authenticity matters. Clients can tell the difference. 6 months later, that prediction proved accurate. Genevieve's agency struggled to retain both clients and talent. Without the ability to take credit for others' work, her own capabilities were exposed as mediocre. 3 major clients left her within weeks of each other, citing execution issues. Meanwhile, our division had grown so successful that the board voted to transition the entire company to our model. The old guard resisted, of course. 2 executives resigned rather than operate with transparency. We wished them well and continued growing. 1 year after that midnight firing, I received an email that stopped me cold. We should talk, G. Genevieve wanted a meeting. Against my team's advice, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. She looked different, the polished exterior somewhat faded, her confidence dimmed. We ordered our drinks in awkward silence. Your model is winning, she finally said, staring into her cup. My agency is losing clients every month. I waited, letting her fill the silence. I thought I could replicate what you built, but it's not working. She looked up. I need your help. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of stealing my work, after firing me while I was seriously ill, she wanted my help? Why would I do that? I asked simply. Because you're better than me, she admitted, the words clearly painful. Not just creatively. You built something I can't figure out how to copy. I studied her face, searching for manipulation. I found only desperation. You never understood what makes the model work? I said. It's not about the structure or the compensation formulas. It's about actually valuing people's contributions instead of seeing them as stepping stones for your advancement. She winced. I can learn. Can you? After 15 years of taking credit for others' work? She had no answer for that. Here's what I can offer, I said finally. Not a partnership or collaboration, but advice. Start over. Close your agency. Take time to create something, anything, that's truly yours. Experience what it's like to build rather than take. Then, maybe, you'll understand why our model works. That's your help? Telling me to quit? That's my honesty. Something you never gave me. She left shortly after, angry and humiliated. I felt no satisfaction watching her go, just a quiet certainty that I'd broken free from her influence entirely. 3 years have passed since that night Genevieve fired me. Our model has been adopted by a dozen other agencies. The industry publications that once celebrated her now feature case studies about our approach. I've been asked to speak at business schools about ethical leadership and innovation. Last month, I received a package. Inside was a small, independent magazine featuring a modest ad campaign for a local business. The creative director, Genevieve Weston. The work wasn't groundbreaking, but it was solid, authentic, and undeniably hers. Attached was a note. You were right. I'm starting over. Building, not taking. Thank you. I keep that note in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the journey, from fevered and fired to founding a movement that changed an industry. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's building something so necessary that it makes the old ways obsolete. It's transforming your pain into progress that helps others avoid the same fate. Genevieve took my job, my credit, and nearly my health. In return, I created a new way of working that made her entire approach irrelevant. I didn't need to destroy her. I simply needed to build something better. She fired me at my lowest moment, thinking she was cutting me loose before I became a liability. Instead, she freed me to create something she could never have imagined, a system where people like her can no longer thrive by taking credit for others' brilliance. That's the sweetest revenge of all, using their betrayal as fuel to build something that ensures no one can ever do to others what they did to you. If you've ever had your work stolen or your contributions ignored, remember this. Your ideas have power, even when others try to claim them. Document everything. Build allies who see your value. And when the moment comes, whether through betrayal or opportunity, be ready to create something entirely new. Sometimes getting fired is just the universe telling you it's time to light your own path forward. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us share more stories of resilience and transformation. And leave a comment below if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal. I read every response and draw strength from this community's experiences. Remember, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. Thanks for staying with me until the end. You're just a number here, Thea. Everyone is replaceable. Preston slid my carefully prepared raise request back across his gleaming desk without even looking at the second page. 5 years of exceptional performance reviews, 3 major project completions ahead of schedule, and countless late nights, all dismissed with a wave of his manicured hand. I sat there, the air suddenly thin in my lungs. The orchid on his desk seemed to mock me with its perfect symmetry. But the quarterly reports show my team outperformed every... The decision is final. He checked his watch. We're done here. I gathered my papers with steady hands, refusing to let him see how deeply his dismissal cut. As I reached the door, he added, "Remember, there are 20 candidates who would take your position tomorrow if given the chance." 3 days later, I was enjoying a rare, quiet dinner at Castellano's, a small Italian bistro downtown. I had just ordered my meal when a child's voice pierced the restaurant's gentle hum. "Miss Thea, Miss Thea." The sound of my name in that particular voice sent an electric current down my spine. Before I could fully process it, a small body crashed into my side, small arms wrapping around my waist with the unrestrained enthusiasm only children possess. "Everett?" I whispered, looking down at the mop of curly hair I would recognize anywhere. I glanced up and locked eyes with Preston across the restaurant. His fork clattered against fine china, his face draining of color as recognition dawned. Beside him, his wife Olivia turned, confusion morphing into sharp suspicion. "Who is she?" I could read her lips forming the question, though I couldn't hear her words. Time suspended between us, boss and employee, past and present, lies and truth, all converging in the innocent excitement of a 7-year-old boy. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank you for listening to our stories. Many people hear these tales of workplace revenge, but forget to hit that like button or subscribe. If you're enjoying this story of how my boss's dismissive words came back to haunt him, make sure you follow for more incredible true accounts of people standing up for themselves. when others try to push them down. Now, let me tell you who I am and how I ended up in this impossible situation. My name is Thea Lockland. 6 years before that moment in Preston's office, I wasn't a corporate employee. I was a doctoral candidate in developmental psychology at Westfield University. My dissertation focused on attachment patterns in early childhood, specifically how consistent caregiving affects cognitive and emotional development. I needed a primary research subject, and through my academic advisor, I found the perfect opportunity: a wealthy family seeking a live-in nanny for their newborn son. The position would allow me to conduct my research while earning enough to support myself through my studies. The family would benefit from having a highly qualified caregiver with specialized knowledge of child development. When I first met Preston and Olivia, they were both ambitious executives building their careers. They lived in a stunning contemporary home with walls of glass overlooking the city. They spoke about their new baby, Everett, as though he were another achievement to be managed alongside their professional accomplishments. "We need someone who can provide structure," Olivia had explained during my interview. "Our schedules are unpredictable, but Everett's shouldn't be." I moved into the garden-level suite of their home when Everett was just 3 months old. For the next 3 years, I became his primary caregiver while meticulously documenting his developmental milestones for my research. I bathed him, fed him, sang him to sleep, taught him his first words, and comforted him when he woke crying in the night. Preston and Olivia weren't neglectful parents. Not exactly. They loved their son in their way, but they viewed parenting through the lens of efficiency. They scheduled quality time with Everett like business appointments. Preston would sometimes cancel at the last minute when work demanded his attention, which was often. "He won't remember anyway," Preston would say when I expressed concern about their absences. "That's why we have you." And so Everett and I developed our own world. We had secret games, special songs, and a treasure map I helped him create that we painted on the ceiling above his bed so he could find imaginary treasures while falling asleep. I taught him a special handshake that always ended with both of us making elephant sounds, a private joke that never failed to make him giggle uncontrollably. When my research period ended and I completed my dissertation, leaving that home was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Everett was 4 by then, old enough to understand I was leaving but too young to fully comprehend why his Miss Thea wouldn't be there every morning when he woke up. "I'll still see you sometimes," I promised him, though I wasn't sure how that would work in practice. "And you'll always be my favorite researcher assistant." After earning my doctorate, I faced the harsh reality many academics discover: a PhD doesn't guarantee financial stability. With substantial student loans and a competitive job market in academia, I needed to pivot. I accepted a position in organizational behavior at a corporate consulting firm, using my research skills in a more lucrative field. 2 years into my corporate career, the company announced it had been acquired by a larger conglomerate. We were assured our positions were secure, but management would be restructured. I didn't connect the dots until orientation day with our new executive team, when Preston walked onto the stage as our division president. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? The sleep-deprived graduate student in comfortable clothes who had cared for his son had transformed into a polished professional. I'd lost weight from stress during my final academic year, cut my long hair into a sleek bob, and started using my formal name professionally. To him, I was just another employee, one of many faces in a corporate headcount. I considered resigning immediately, but my student loans weren't going to pay themselves. Besides, Preston worked primarily from the executive offices in another building. Our paths rarely crossed, and when they did, he showed no sign of recognition. For 3 years, I excelled in my position, earning promotions and building a reputation for exceptional work. Then came the reorganization that placed me directly under Preston's management. Suddenly, I was reporting to the man whose son still appeared in my dreams, whose house I had lived in, whose family life I had documented in academic detail. Still, he never made the connection. Until that day in his office when he called me just a number. Until that night in the restaurant when his son crashed into my side, face alight with recognition and joy. "Miss Thea taught me how to read," Everett was exclaiming to his mother as Preston approached our table with measured steps. She knows about the stars on my ceiling and the treasure map. We have a special handshake with elephant noises. Elephant noises? Olivia repeated, her gaze shifting between her son and me with increasing intensity. It's been a while, I said softly, standing to face them both. Everett has grown so much. Preston cleared his throat. Thea was a babysitter we hired for a short time when Everett was very small. The lie hung between us as Everett shook his head vigorously. Not a babysitter. Miss Thea lived with us. She was there every morning and every night. She made my lunches and read 3 books at bedtime and knew exactly how to check for monsters. Olivia's expression hardened. You told me your mother watched him during that period. My mother helped occasionally, Preston said, a muscle twitching near his temple. Thea was temporary household help. 3 years isn't temporary, I corrected gently. And I wasn't just household help, as you well know. 3 years? Olivia repeated, her voice rising slightly. Preston, what is she talking about? The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around us, other diners sensing the tension radiating from our unexpected reunion. Everett, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, tugged at my hand. Do you still have our picture book? The one with all the leaves we collected at the park? I do, I answered truthfully, my heart aching at the memory of our nature scrapbook. I've kept everything. Perhaps we should discuss this elsewhere, Preston suggested, his corporate mask slipping to reveal naked anxiety. Thea, I had no idea that you had been, that I had been the primary caregiver for your son during his formative years. I finished for him, the person who documented his first steps, first words, and first full night of sleep. The researcher whose work on your son earned me a doctorate in developmental psychology? That Thea? The color drained from Olivia's face. Researcher? Preston, what is happening right now? I knelt to Everett's level, not wanting him to witness the adult tension building around him. It's wonderful to see you, buddy. You've grown so tall and handsome. Maybe we can catch up another time when it's better for everyone. His face fell. But I just found you again. I know, I said, touching his cheek gently. And I'm not disappearing, I promise. As I straightened up, Preston stepped closer, lowering his voice. Thea, I think we need to talk privately about your position with the company. The threat was implicit but clear. My job was suddenly in jeopardy. Actually, I replied, keeping my voice steady, I think what we need to discuss is the remarkable coincidence that led me to work for the same man whose son was the subject of my doctoral research. The research that your company now owns the rights to under our intellectual property agreement. Preston's eyes widened slightly as he processed my words. He hadn't just hired a former nanny, he'd hired the researcher whose work his company now controlled. We'll be in touch, he said finally, placing a hand on his wife's back to guide her away. Everett, say goodbye, we're leaving. But Dad... Now, Everett. I watched them go, Everett twisting to wave at me until they turned the corner. My dinner sat forgotten, growing cold as I considered what had just happened and what it meant for my future. The following Monday, an urgent meeting request from Preston awaited me when I arrived at work. The subject line read simply, Discussion of Recent Events. When I entered his office, he was standing by the window rather than seated behind his desk, a strategic choice to appear less confrontational. Thea, he began, turning to face me. I've reviewed your personnel file and realized I may have been hasty in our last meeting. Your contributions to the company have been significant. How interesting that you discovered this after seeing me with your son, I remarked, remaining standing though he gestured toward a chair. The timing is unfortunate, he conceded, but I've reconsidered your raise request. In fact, I'd like to offer you the full amount plus a retention bonus if we can put this awkward situation behind us. By awkward situation, you mean the fact that you didn't recognize the woman who raised your son for 3 years? Or the fact that you lied to your wife about who was caring for him? His professional demeanor cracked slightly. That's a personal matter. No, Preston. That's where you're wrong. You made it professional when you dismissed me as just a number, despite knowing nothing about me or my qualifications. You made it professional when you threatened my position after our encounter at the restaurant. I never threatened. You didn't have to say the words. We both know what you meant. I took a deep breath. I'm not interested in special treatment. I want what I've earned through my work here, nothing more. He nodded, relief washing over his features. Of course. The raise is approved, effective immediately. I trust we can maintain a professional relationship moving forward. Absolutely. I agreed. I've always been professional. As I turned to leave, he added, Thea, about Everett. I'd appreciate your discretion. Olivia and I have some things to work through. I paused at the door. Your family dynamics aren't my concern, Preston. But I won't lie if Everett reaches out to me again. He deserves better than that. The weeks that followed were a strange dance of avoidance and careful observation. Preston kept his distance professionally, approving my projects without the scrutiny he'd applied before. Occasionally, I'd catch him watching me during meetings with an unreadable expression. Then came the email that changed everything. The company had announced a major initiative focused on employee wellness and work-life balance, a corporate response to increasing turnover rates. Each department would present their vision for implementation at the annual company-wide conference, with the CEO selecting one approach to be adopted company-wide. The winning department would receive substantial additional funding, and its leader would join the executive committee. It was the kind of opportunity that defined careers. I knew immediately what I had to do. While Preston focused on productivity metrics and cost-benefit analyses for his presentation, I began crafting something entirely different. I dove into my doctoral research, anonymizing the data but preserving the powerful narrative of how consistent nurturing creates measurable developmental advantages. The night before the conference, I received a text from an unknown number. Miss Thea, this is Everett. Mom got your number from Dad's phone. Can we talk sometime? I miss you. My heart twisted in my chest. After all these years, he still remembered me, still wanted me in his life. I responded carefully. I miss you too, Everett. Let's ask your parents about setting up a proper time to catch up. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Mom is mad at Dad about you. She says he lied about everything. I stared at my phone, unsure how to respond to this glimpse into their family turmoil. Before I could decide, another message came through. I told Mom you were the best, that you never forgot my birthday like Dad sometimes did, that you knew all my favorite things. The stakes had just gotten higher. Tomorrow I would present in front of the entire company, including Preston. And now I knew his marriage was strained because of the truths that had emerged about his parenting choices. I had a decision to make: proceed with my plan or back away from the potential damage it might cause. As I prepared for the conference the next morning, Everett's messages weighed on me. Was I crossing a line by using my research in this presentation, even in anonymized form? Or was I simply standing up for myself and the work I had dedicated years of my life to completing? I chose a simple black dress and arrived early to check the audiovisual equipment. Executives and department heads filled the front rows. Preston sat beside the CEO, scrolling through his presentation notes with intense focus. He didn't look up when I entered. The conference began with standard corporate fanfare, quarterly results, market projections, and strategic objectives. Then came the departmental presentations on employee wellness initiatives. One after another, managers offered variations on the same tired ideas: gym memberships, mindfulness apps, and occasional work-from-home days. When Preston took the stage, he spoke confidently about optimizing human resources and balancing output expectations against burnout thresholds. He presented employees as assets to be managed efficiently, their well-being important only as it affected productivity. The data indicates that modest investments in wellness programs yield a 16% reduction in absenteeism, he explained, flipping through slides of graphs and charts. By treating these interventions as performance enhancers rather than employee benefits, we maximize return on investment. The audience responded with polite applause. The CEO nodded appreciatively at the financial focus. Preston caught my eye as he returned to his seat, a slight smile suggesting he believed his presentation had secured the win. Then it was my turn. Good morning, I began, standing before the assembled company without slides. I'd like to start by asking you all a question. When was the last time you felt truly valued? Not for what you produced, but for who you are. The room grew quiet. For the past 5 years, I've worked in this company analyzing behavioral patterns and organizational dynamics. But before that, I spent 3 years conducting doctoral research on human development and attachment theory. What I discovered then is directly relevant to what we're discussing today. I activated my first slide, a simple graph showing developmental milestones charted against different caregiving approaches. This represents data from a longitudinal study on childhood development. The blue line shows a child with consistent, attentive caregiving. The red line shows periods when that same child experienced significant caregiver absence or inconsistency. The difference between the lines was dramatic, with clear developmental advantages corresponding to periods of consistent care. You'll notice something remarkable, I continued. When children receive regular, meaningful attention, they don't just develop cognitive skills faster, they develop resilience, creativity, and problem-solving abilities that persist long after the observation period. I clicked to the next slide, a split screen showing workplace metrics. Now look at this data from our own company. When employees experience consistent recognition and meaningful engagement from leadership, we see the same pattern: increased innovation, stronger loyalty, and greater resilience during challenging periods. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Preston shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The research is clear. Human beings never outgrow their need for meaningful connection and recognition. When we treat people as replaceable numbers, we strip away the very thing that drives exceptional performance, the sense that who they are matters as much as what they do. For the next 15 minutes, I presented a vision of workplace culture built on the same principles that help children thrive: consistency, authentic recognition, and genuine investment in development. I never mentioned Preston or Everett by name, but the parallels to my research were unmistakable to anyone who knew the truth. In conclusion, I said, meeting the CEO's gaze directly, we can continue seeing employees as interchangeable resources to be optimized, or we can recognize them as irreplaceable individuals whose unique contributions create our competitive advantage. The science is clear about which approach yields better long-term results. The room erupted in applause, not the polite, obligatory kind that had followed other presentations, but enthusiastic, extended clapping. People were standing. The CEO was nodding thoughtfully, making notes. As I returned to my seat, I caught Preston's expression, a complex mixture of recognition, anger, and something else. Fear, perhaps. He now understood exactly who I was and what I knew. The CEO approached the podium as the applause faded. Thank you all for these thoughtful presentations. While we have much to consider, I must say that Thea's approach resonates strongly with the direction our board has been discussing. The connection between developmental psychology and workplace dynamics is fascinating and offers us a unique opportunity to differentiate our company culture. Preston's face remained carefully neutral, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his tablet. I'd like to invite Thea to expand her presentation into a formal proposal for a new department focused on employee development and organizational culture. The CEO continued. This initiative will report directly to me as we consider making it a cornerstone of our corporate identity moving forward. The meeting concluded with logistics announcements, but the buzz in the room centered on my presentation. Colleagues stopped to congratulate me, while Preston slipped out a side door without speaking to anyone. That afternoon, I received an email from the CEO's assistant scheduling a private meeting for the following day. I also received another text from Everett. Dad was really quiet at breakfast today. Mom asked if he was worried about some presentation. Are you giving a presentation, Miss Thea? I stared at my phone, wondering how much this perceptive child understood about the adult dynamics swirling around him. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Can I tell you a secret? I found your old notebook in Dad's office, the one with all the pictures of me learning things. Why does Dad have it? My heart raced. My research journal, containing observations, developmental notes, and documentation of Everett's milestones, should have left with me when I completed my dissertation. I had assumed Preston and Olivia had discarded any remaining materials after I left. Why would Preston have kept it all these years? And more importantly, why would he have it in his office rather than at home? I crafted a careful response. That notebook was part of my work when I cared for you. Maybe your dad kept it as a memory of when you were little. The reply came quickly. He has lots of notebooks and files with your name on them. A chill ran through me. Files with my name? That made no sense unless Preston had recognized me long before our encounter in his office. Unless he had been tracking my career, my research, my life. The next morning, I arrived early for my meeting with the CEO, my mind still churning with questions about Preston and those files. The executive floor was quiet, most offices still dark. The CEO's assistant showed me into a conference room where he was already waiting, reviewing documents with a woman I recognized as the head of human resources. "Thea, thank you for joining us," he said, standing to greet me. "Your presentation yesterday has catalyzed exactly the kind of discussion we needed. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to lead our new employee development initiative." I blinked in surprise. "That's incredibly flattering." "It's not flattery," he corrected. "It's recognition of your unique qualifications. Your background in developmental psychology, combined with your corporate experience, gives you perspective no one else here has." "I appreciate that, but what exactly would this role entail?" "You'd build a department focused on transforming our approach to human capital," he explained, sliding a folder toward me. "Competitive salary, executive status, and a direct reporting line to me. You'd also oversee the wellness programs currently under Preston's division." The HR director smiled encouragingly. "We've already drafted an announcement about the reorganization. Preston has agreed to transition those teams to your leadership." "Preston agreed to this?" I asked, unable to mask my skepticism. The CEO and HR director exchanged glances. "Let's just say Preston understands the value of being a team player right now," the CEO replied carefully. "There have been some concerning patterns in his leadership approach that your presentation highlighted very effectively." I opened the folder to find not only a job description and compensation package, but also a summary of employee satisfaction surveys from Preston's division, showing consistently low scores in areas like recognition, development opportunities, and leadership trust. "You wouldn't just be building something new," the HR director added. "You'd be healing something broken." As I reviewed the documents, a notification appeared on my phone. Another text from Everett. "Mom and Dad had a big fight about you last night. Dad said he handled it, but Mom said she talked to someone at your company who told her you've worked there for years. Why didn't Dad know who you were?" The CEO noticed my expression change. "Everything all right?" I set my phone face down on the table. "Yes, sorry, just an unexpected message." "Take your time reviewing the offer," he said, standing to indicate the meeting was concluding. "We'd like your decision by the end of the week, but I hope you'll accept. Your perspective is exactly what this company needs." As they left me alone with the proposal, I checked Everett's message again, along with a new one that had arrived. "Dad came home with a box of stuff from his office. They're arguing about papers with your name. Mom keeps saying, 'How could you not tell me?' I'm scared, Miss Thea." My chest tightened. Whatever game Preston was playing had now spilled over to affect his son, the child I had nurtured and protected for 3 formative years. This had gone too far. I texted back, "Everything will be okay, Everett. Adults sometimes have disagreements that aren't about you. You haven't done anything wrong by talking to me." His response was immediate. "Can I see you? For real, not just texts?" Before I could answer, my phone rang an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Thea, this is Olivia. We need to talk." Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I think that's a good idea," I agreed, moving to a more private corner of the conference room. "Is Everett okay?" "He's with my sister," she replied. "I need to understand what's happening. Preston has been evasive. And finding your research journals with all those detailed observations of our son, hidden in his office for years." Her voice cracked slightly. "I deserve the truth." "You do," I said quietly. "When would you like to meet? Can you come to Riverbank Park in an hour? By the East Entrance Fountain?" I checked my calendar, nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. "I'll be there." An hour later, I spotted Olivia sitting on a bench near the fountain, sunglasses covering her eyes despite the cloudy day. She'd aged well in the years since I'd seen her regularly. Her blonde hair now had subtle streaks of silver that suited her. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat beside her, leaving appropriate distance between us. "Of course." She removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes. "I need to understand something. You lived in our home for 3 years, caring for our son while conducting research for your dissertation, correct?" "Yes." You and Preston signed extensive consent forms. The University Ethics Board approved everything. Everett was never at risk. "I remember signing something," she acknowledged. "Preston handled most of it. I was so busy with the merger that year." "Your son was always my priority," I assured her. "The research was observational, documenting normal development and attachment patterns. Everett received excellent care." "That's becoming very clear," she said with a bitter laugh. "Apparently, he still asks about you, all these years later." I remained silent, unsure how to respond. "What I can't understand," she continued, "is why Preston pretended not to know you when you ended up working at his company. The personnel files show you've been there for 5 years. He's been your direct supervisor for 2 years. "I've been wondering the same thing," I admitted. "I assumed he simply didn't recognize me. I look different now, and I use my formal name professionally." Olivia shook her head. "That's what doesn't make sense. I found research journals in his office, journals you presumably left behind, with detailed notes about Everett's development. But I also found a file with newspaper clippings about your academic achievements, your job announcements, even a copy of your employment application from when you joined the company." My skin prickled with unease. "He's been tracking me?" "It appears so. When I confronted him, he claimed he was monitoring a potential liability, that your research on our son could somehow damage his reputation if it became public." "That's absurd," I said. "The research was conducted ethically with full consent. Everett's identity was protected in all published materials." "I know," Olivia said. "I read your dissertation last night. It's brilliant work, and nothing in it could possibly harm Everett or our family. In fact," her voice caught, "in fact, it helped me understand why my son feels like a stranger to me sometimes. You were more his parent than either of us." The pain in her voice was raw, genuine. "Olivia, you were building your career. You made choices based on what you thought was best at the time." "Choices Preston encouraged," she said sharply. "He always insisted Everett was in good hands, that quality parenting was about efficiency, not quantity of time." She laughed hollowly. "Meanwhile, he was hiding the fact that our son formed his primary attachment to someone who wasn't family." We sat in silence for a moment, the fountain's gentle splashing filling the space between us. "There's something else," Olivia finally said. "After your presentation yesterday, yes, Preston told me about it. He came home agitated. He packed up all those files from his office and tried to destroy them. That's when I intercepted them." "Why would he do that?" "I think," she said carefully, "he's afraid of what you know, not just about Everett, but about him." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I found financial records mixed in with your research notes, personal accounts I never knew existed, transactions that don't make sense for our family or his position." My mind raced, connecting scattered dots. Preston's insistence that I was just a number, his panicked reaction at the restaurant, the mysterious files tracking my career, the CEO's comment about concerning patterns in Preston's leadership. "Olivia, I think you should take those financial records to a lawyer," I said quietly, "and possibly to the company's compliance officer." "I already have," she replied, surprising me. "This morning." "What?" "I may have been an absent mother, but I'm not a fool," she said with newfound steel in her voice. "Preston has been hiding things for years, apparently including you. I needed to understand why." My phone chimed with a calendar alert, a reminder for a meeting in 30 minutes. "I need to get back to the office," I said, standing. "But thank you for reaching out. I've worried about Everett over the years." "He'd like to see you," Olivia said. "Properly this time, not just an accidental meeting in a restaurant. Would that be okay?" The question hung between us, a peace offering, a recognition, perhaps even an apology. "I'd like that very much," I answered honestly. As I walked back toward the office, another text from Everett arrived. Mom says I can see you soon for real. Is that true? I smiled at his enthusiasm. Yes, it's true. I'm looking forward to it. Then I noticed an urgent email from the CEO's office requesting my immediate presence upon my return. The subject line read, "Confidential, Preston situation." When I arrived at the executive floor, security personnel were stationed outside Preston's office while 2 IT staff members worked at his computer. The CEO waved me into his private conference room where the company's legal counsel and the compliance officer were waiting. "Thea, thank you for coming so quickly," the CEO said, his expression grave. "I'll get straight to the point. We've uncovered significant financial irregularities in Preston's division. Funds misallocated, reports falsified, possibly worse." The compliance officer nodded. "We received concerning documentation this morning that corroborated suspicions we've been investigating quietly for some time." "Documentation?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "From his wife," the legal counsel confirmed, "along with a rather remarkable story about your history with their family." I took a deep breath. "I can explain." The CEO raised his hand. "No need. We've verified your employment history and academic credentials. Your transparency in yesterday's presentation about your background in developmental psychology speaks for itself. What concerns us is Preston's apparent effort to conceal your prior connection while simultaneously tracking your career. We have evidence suggesting he deliberately blocked your advancement within the company," the compliance officer added, "including documentation that your previous raise requests were approved at the division level but mysteriously denied after crossing his desk." "There's more," the legal counsel said. "Preliminary examination of his files indicates he may have been using your research, without attribution or compensation, to develop executive coaching programs he's been selling privately while employed." Here, the room seemed to spin slightly as the implications sank in. "We'll need your cooperation as this investigation proceeds," the CEO continued. "But first, I want to reaffirm our offer from this morning. The company needs your expertise now more than ever, not just for the employee development initiative, but to help repair the damage Preston may have caused." As they outlined next steps and the compliance officer scheduled a formal interview, a final text from Everett lit up my phone. "Dad just left with some men from his work. Mom is crying but says everything will be better now. When can I see you, Miss Thea?" In that moment, staring at the innocent question from a child caught in adult chaos, I realized something profound. Revenge had never been my goal. Justice had found its own path, through truth, through professional integrity, and through a child who simply remembered the person who had been there for him when it mattered most. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new corner office reviewing applications for the growing employee development initiative. The glass walls offered a view of the city skyline, the same view Preston had enjoyed until recently. His name had become a whisper in the hallways. After the internal investigation confirmed financial misconduct spanning years, he had been escorted from the building. The legal team was still determining whether to pursue criminal charges. His executive biography had vanished from the company website, replaced by mine. A knock at my open door interrupted my thoughts. My assistant poked her head in. "Thea, your 3 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Natalie. Please send them in." I stood as Olivia entered, holding Everett's hand. The boy, no longer the toddler I had known, but not yet a teenager, bounced on his toes with barely contained excitement. "Miss Thea!" He broke free from his mother and rushed toward me, stopping just short of a hug, suddenly unsure. "You look different here." I smiled, crouching to his level. "Different how?" "More important," he decided, "like the grown-ups on TV who run things." I laughed. "Well, I do run things now, but I'm still the same Miss Thea who helped you look for monsters under your bed." That was all the reassurance he needed. His arms wrapped around my neck in a tight hug that transported me back to bedtime stories and midday adventures. Olivia watched our reunion with a complex expression, part guilt, part wonder, part relief. Over the past 2 weeks, we had spoken several times, rebuilding a connection that had never truly existed during my years in their home. "Thank you for making time for this," she said as Everett explored my office, examining the framed degrees on the wall with curiosity. It means everything to him. To me too, I admitted. I've missed him. She nodded, her eyes following her son. Preston's lawyer called this morning. They want to negotiate. What does that mean exactly? It means he's scared, she said flatly. The company has evidence of financial impropriety and I have. She glanced at Everett, lowering her voice. I have documentation of other things, personal choices that would complicate his future employment prospects. I raised an eyebrow. Affairs? She gave a slight nod. Among other indiscretions, he wants to trade his silence about certain company matters for our silence about his personal conduct. Are you considering it? I'm considering what's best for Everett, she said, watching her son, who was now attempting to spin in my office chair. A public scandal helps no one, but complete silence feels like letting him escape consequences. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The CEO's direct line. I should take this, I apologized. Of course. We'll step out for a moment. She touched Everett's shoulder. Let's find the snack machine while Miss Thea takes her call. As they left, I answered the phone. Thea, I've just finished a conversation with Preston's attorney, the CEO said without preamble. They're proposing a confidential settlement. Olivia mentioned he was looking to negotiate. This is about more than just Preston's misconduct, he continued. It seems he's prepared to make claims about the company misusing your research, the developmental studies you conducted with his son. I gripped the edge of my desk. That's absurd. He's the one who kept copies of my research journals and tracked my career. We know that. But a public fight gets messy for everyone. The board is considering their offer, with conditions. What conditions? That's why I'm calling. They want assurance that you're comfortable with the proposed resolution. You've become too valuable to risk alienating. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks ago, Preston had called me just a number, replaceable and insignificant. Now the company was restructuring around my expertise and making me central to settlement negotiations. What exactly is being proposed? I asked. Preston resigns permanently. He receives standard severance but no bonus or stock options. He signs a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering both his financial misconduct and any personal matters his wife may have documentation of. In exchange, the company doesn't press charges, and we all move forward without public drama. I considered the implications, and my research would be formally recognized as your intellectual property, with appropriate licensing agreements if the company continues using any aspects of it in our development programs. Plus, we'd fund a new research initiative under your leadership. After ending the call, I stood at my office window, watching the city below. People moved through their days, unaware of the power shifts and private reckonings happening in glass towers above them. Olivia and Everett returned, the boy clutching a chocolate bar. Everything okay? Olivia asked, noting my pensive expression. Yes, that was the CEO discussing settlement terms with Preston. Her eyes narrowed. And? They're offering a path that avoids public scandal while still ensuring consequences. I turned to face her fully. What do you want, Olivia? Not what's easiest or what the lawyers recommend. What do you actually want from this situation? She considered the question, watching Everett, who had returned to examining the certificates on my wall. I want my son to grow up understanding that actions have consequences, but also that life is complicated, she said finally. I want him to see that I made mistakes as a parent, but I'm trying to correct them. And she hesitated. I want him to have you in his life, if you're willing. You were the constant he needed when neither Preston nor I could be. Her honesty caught me off guard. Look, Miss Thea, Everett called out, pointing to a framed photograph I kept beside my degrees. That's me. The picture showed a much younger Everett in a public garden, fascinated by a butterfly that had landed on a flower he was holding. I had taken it during one of our nature walks for my research on childhood wonder and discovery. It is you, I confirmed, walking over to him. That picture reminds me every day of why my work matters. He beamed with pride, then grew serious. Mom says Dad did something bad at work. Is that why you have his office now? Olivia and I exchanged glances, silently negotiating how to respond. Your dad made some mistakes, I said carefully. People sometimes do that, especially when they forget what's really important. Like being kind? Everett asked. Exactly like that, I agreed. And remembering that every person matters. Later that afternoon, after Olivia and Everett had left with plans for a proper dinner together the following weekend, I received an unexpected message. Preston had requested a brief meeting before he cleared out his remaining personal items. The company's legal counsel advised against it, but something in me needed closure, not just for my professional journey, but for the years I had spent nurturing his child while he remained distant. Security escorted him to a conference room where I waited alone. He looked smaller somehow, his tailored suit no longer projecting authority but instead hanging on him like borrowed confidence. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said, remaining standing though I had gestured to a chair. What can I do for you, Preston? He placed a leather portfolio on the table between us. These belong to you. The last of your research journals and notes that were in my possession. I've deleted all electronic copies. I made no move to take them. Why did you keep them all these years? He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the portfolio. At first, it was professional interest, he finally said. Your observations about development and motivation were insightful. I incorporated them into my management approach. Without attribution, I noted. Yes, he acknowledged this with a slight nod. Later, when you joined the company, I recognized you immediately. This confirmation of what Olivia had discovered still managed to surprise me. Yet you said nothing. For 5 years. I convinced myself it was a coincidence at first. Then I worried what might happen if people knew my son's primary attachment figure during his formative years worked under my management. It seemed complicated. So you blocked my advancement instead. He flinched slightly. I told myself I was being objective, while calling me just a number. He stopped, reconsidering. I have no excuse for that. Seeing you excel despite my efforts to minimize your contributions triggered something defensive in me. Your presentation showed me exactly what I'd been denying. I studied him, this man who had held such power over my career and who had once entrusted me with his child's development while remaining absent himself. Why are you really here, Preston? This isn't about returning research notes. He met my gaze directly for the first time. Everett asked to see me yesterday. During our conversation, he asked why I never talked about you all these years, why I pretended not to know how important you were in his life. What did you tell him? The truth, that I was insecure about someone else having a stronger connection with my son than I did. His voice wavered slightly. That I made choices that prioritized my career over his childhood, and by the time I recognized my mistake, the damage was done. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Olivia is filing for divorce, he continued. My career is essentially over. No company will hire an executive with financial misconduct allegations, even without criminal charges. I've lost everything that once defined me. I'm sorry about your marriage, I said honestly. But the rest was your choice, Preston. Every step of the way. I know. He straightened his shoulders. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the impact of my actions. On the company, on my family, and on you. You deserved better. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Preston. He paused at the door. Everett is an exceptional child with remarkable emotional intelligence. I said. Don't waste whatever relationship you can still build with him. Some things can't be replaced once they're lost. A month later, I stood before a packed auditorium presenting the official launch of our company's Employee Development Initiative. The program incorporated elements of my doctoral research, while creating pathways for advancement based on individual strengths rather than standardized metrics. The CEO beamed from the front row as I outlined how our approach would differentiate us in the industry. Investors and board members nodded with approval at projected retention improvements and innovation metrics. By recognizing that each employee brings unique value that cannot be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet, I explained, we create a culture where people invest their best selves in their work. After the presentation, during the reception, I found myself approached by a distinguished woman I recognized as the chairperson of the board. Impressive work, Thea, she said, offering her hand. Your perspective is exactly what this company needed. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. She smiled. I understand you have personal experience with the principles you're implementing. Something about research conducted with a child subject years ago? I tensed slightly. Yes, though those connections weren't initially apparent to everyone. Blindness comes in many forms, she remarked, especially when we're looking at people as resources rather than individuals. She sipped her champagne thoughtfully. Preston never quite grasped that distinction. Few of us do when climbing the corporate ladder, I offered diplomatically. Perhaps, but the difference is whether we learn before the fall. Her eyes twinkled with knowing wisdom. I suspect you've known that lesson longer than most of us. Later that evening, I met Olivia and Everett for our now regular Friday dinner. As Everett enthusiastically described his science project involving plant growth under different light conditions, I noticed a new lightness in Olivia's demeanor. You seem happy, I commented when Everett excused himself to examine the restaurant's fish tank. I am, she admitted. For the first time in years. The divorce proceedings are moving forward amicably. Preston has agreed to everything. The house, generous support, flexible custody arrangements. That's surprising. He's changed, she said, watching her son across the room. Or perhaps he's finding his way back to the person he was before ambition consumed him. Either way, he's making genuine efforts with Everett. I'm glad to hear that. She turned her attention back to me. What about you? The company announcement today was all over the business news. Revolutionary approach to workplace culture, they're calling it. I smiled. It's gratifying to see research that began with your son transforming an entire organization. From nanny researcher to executive suite, she mused. Quite a journey. With an unexpected detour through being just a number, I added. We both laughed at the irony. You know, Olivia said, her expression growing serious. I've been thinking about what you said about attachment and development, about how children need consistent presence more than perfect parenting. It's never too late to strengthen those bonds, I assured her. That's what I'm counting on. She glanced at Everett, now pressing his nose against the fish tank, for both Everett and Preston in different ways. 6 months later, I stood in my office reviewing the quarterly employee satisfaction reports. Every metric had improved significantly since implementing our new development initiative. Retention was up, recruitment costs were down, and innovation metrics showed remarkable growth. On my desk sat a framed note from the CEO. You were never just a number. You were the equation we needed all along. My phone chimed with a text from Everett. Dad helped me build a telescope. Can I show you this weekend? As I typed my reply, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From studying child development in Preston's home, to reshaping the corporate culture he had once dominated. From being dismissed as replaceable to becoming essential. The greatest revenge wasn't taking Preston's job or exposing his misconduct. It wasn't even the professional recognition or the vindication of my research. The true victory was in creating something positive from the experience, a workplace where people were valued for their unique contributions, a continuing relationship with Everett, and perhaps most surprisingly, a redemptive path for Preston himself, as he rebuilt his relationship with his son. I had entered Preston's office that day seeking nothing more than fair recognition for my work. I left with a reminder that had guided my research from the beginning. Human connections matter more than any professional achievement. When we forget that truth, we risk losing everything that gives meaning to success. As I looked out over the city, where somewhere a young boy was eagerly waiting to show me his telescope, I knew I had found something better than revenge. I had found justice in its most complete form, not just consequences for past wrongs, but transformation for the future. If you've stayed with me through this journey, I want to thank you for listening to my story. So many of us have experienced being treated as just a number in our professional lives, dismissed, undervalued, or overlooked despite our contributions. I hope my experience reminds you that your unique value can never truly be diminished by someone else's failure to recognize it. If this story resonated with you, Please take a moment to like and subscribe for more tales of workplace justice and personal transformation. Your support helps these important stories reach others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Remember, in a world that sometimes tries to reduce us to numbers, your individual voice and experience matter immensely. Thank you for being part of this community where we celebrate the power of human connection. The pain struck without warning. My vision blurred as the boardroom spun, presentation charts tumbling from my hands. The last thing I heard was Ro's voice, not asking if I was okay, but complaining about the interrupted quarterly review. "Someone call an ambulance," a distant voice said as my knees buckled. Time fragmented after that, ceiling lights streaking past, the metallic rattle of the gurney, an oxygen mask pressed against my face. The paramedics' calm questions I couldn't answer through waves of agony. "Suspected internal hemorrhage," a doctor explained hours later. "We need immediate surgery before her condition deteriorates further." I'd followed company protocol when I moved to this city 3 months ago, listing my direct supervisor as my emergency contact. No family nearby, no close friends yet. The nurse nodded and stepped away to make the call as medical staff prepped surgical instruments. Through the haze of pain medication, I heard one side of the conversation. "This is Northeast Memorial. Your employee, Merrick Ellis, has been brought in with a medical emergency requiring immediate surgery." A pause. "Sir, she needs someone to authorize." Another pause. "I understand today is important, but this is potentially life-threatening." The nurse's expression tightened. "I'll inform her you can't leave the company retreat." "Yes, I'll update you tomorrow." She returned, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal a flash of disgust. "Your boss says he's in the middle of his keynote address and can't step away. He asked if we could call him tomorrow with an update." The irony wasn't lost on me, even through my pain-fogged mind. I'd spent 6 weekends arranging that very retreat, created the schedule he was following, written talking points for the keynote he couldn't interrupt. "Can you sign your own consent forms?" the nurse asked gently. I scrawled my signature as tears tracked down my temples, disappearing into my hair. The anesthesiologist counted backward. 10, 9, 8. I faded into unconsciousness completely alone. 8 days and 1 dangerous intestinal rupture later, I was discharged. No visitors had come. No flowers arrived. My inbox contained only automated task reminders and past due notices. When I finally returned to the office 2 weeks after my collapse, I found someone else sitting at my desk. My awards and certifications had been removed, later discovered stacked in a supply closet, my ongoing projects redistributed. Ro noticed me standing in the doorway of my former workspace around noon. "Ah, you're back," he said, glancing up briefly from his tablet. "The monthly analytics summary is due tomorrow. Your temporary replacement couldn't decipher your system." "No, how are you feeling?" No acknowledgement of my near-death experience, just immediate demands for work. That evening, watching water stream over the angry red line bisecting my abdomen, something shifted inside me. A clarity I had never known before crystallized in my mind. If you're finding this story relatable or it's sparking something inside you, take a second to hit like and subscribe. Trust me, where this journey goes next might change how you think about loyalty in the workplace forever. My name is Merrick Ellis. Before my emergency surgery, I was the logistics coordinator who made impossible things happen. The person who stayed until midnight finalizing presentations others would deliver. The employee who canceled personal plans when something urgent arose, which it always did. I joined my company after graduating with honors and a dual degree in business administration and marketing. My natural talent for streamlining processes quickly made me indispensable, or so I thought. Growing up as the oldest of 4 with a single mother, I learned responsibility early. While other teenagers complained about curfews, I was helping with homework, making dinners, and working part-time to contribute to bills. This translated to my professional life. I handled problems without complaint and anticipated needs before they were voiced. My mother used to say, "Merrick, your heart's too big for your own good." She wasn't wrong. My relationship with Ro began promisingly. He recognized my abilities and gave me increasingly challenging assignments. I thrived under pressure, viewing his standards as professional development rather than exploitation. When the position opened in the city office, Rowe personally recommended me. "This is your chance to shine," he'd said. "I need someone I can trust there." I rented a small apartment, leaving behind my support network for this opportunity. The move emptied my savings, but I believed in the investment. 6 months of exemplary performance would lead to a promotion. Rowe had hinted as much. Those first 3 months, I worked tirelessly. I revitalized stagnant client relationships, created new tracking systems, generated comprehensive reports others relied upon but never acknowledged. The annual retreat became my proving ground. Traditionally a logistical nightmare, I volunteered to coordinate it entirely. Securing the venue, arranging accommodations, scheduling speakers, preparing materials, I handled everything while maintaining my regular workload. 3 ideas I'd presented during planning sessions mysteriously appeared in Rowe's keynote presentation as his own innovative thinking. I swallowed my frustration, focusing on the bigger picture. This wasn't about credit, it was about results, or so I told myself. The morning of my collapse, I'd been pushing through excruciating pain for hours. The presentation I was giving showcased weeks of research, analysis that would save the company thousands while improving client satisfaction. Even as my body betrayed me, my mind was fixed on not letting the team down. After returning from the hospital, I discovered the temporary replacement had been given credit for completing my analysis. My name removed from the report entirely, the savings already being celebrated as a departmental win. That first day back, a colleague named Pax stopped by my reassigned desk. "Everyone was shocked when you collapsed," she said, lowering her voice. "We kept asking Rowe for updates, but he said you were fine and would be back soon. We didn't know it was serious until Junia from accounting bumped into a nurse friend who mentioned you were in intensive care. Did anyone try to visit?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Pax looked uncomfortable. "Rowe said you weren't accepting visitors, that you wanted privacy." I hadn't said that. No one had asked me. "The thing is," Pax continued, "when we learned you were actually in critical condition, several of us questioned why we weren't informed. Rowe got defensive, said we needed to focus on work, not gossip." That evening, I researched emergency contact protocols and employer responsibilities. I discovered that while my company wasn't legally obligated to drop everything for my medical emergency, the ethical lapse was glaring. More importantly, I found patterns of similar situations across industries and solutions implemented by companies who actually valued their employees. For the next 2 weeks, I arrived at work 30 minutes early each day. I organized ongoing projects with meticulous attention to detail. I created comprehensive guides for processes only I fully understood. I introduced colleagues to key contacts and transferred knowledge with professional thoroughness. "You seem remarkably dedicated since your return," Rowe commented, completely misinterpreting my actions. What remained invisible to him? My lunch meeting with our most significant client, whose account generated 40% of company revenue. The client whose business I had secured through relationships I'd cultivated. The client who had expressed concerns about inconsistent service during my absence. He remained unaware of my conversation with the Industry Standards Committee, where I now served as an advisory member. Unaware of my meeting with legal experts about liability questions regarding designated emergency contacts. Unaware of my detailed account of workplace practices I had experienced. Doubt occasionally surfaced. When Rowe mentioned possibly including me in leadership training next quarter. When he actually asked how my recovery was progressing 3 weeks after the fact. When colleagues mentioned how much they had struggled without my expertise, but each twinge from my healing incision reinforced my resolve. I remembered signing consent forms alone, knowing nobody was coming to support me during the most frightening moment of my life. I recalled the nurse's words as she helped me to the bathroom post-surgery. "Your emergency contact asked if we could email updates instead of calling. Said he was too busy for regular phone check-ins." While I methodically prepared for my departure, I noticed concerning patterns throughout the company. Employees worked through illnesses rather than face Rowe's disappointment. People avoided taking legitimate personal days. A culture of martyrdom prevailed, with those sacrificing the most receiving the least support when crises struck. "Did you hear about Tamlin in accounting?" Pax whispered one afternoon. His daughter was hospitalized last week, and he requested a day off to be with her. Rowe told him to manage his priorities and implied the quarterly review was more important. The final confirmation came during a meeting where Rowe presented my streamlined client communication strategy, something I'd developed during late nights and weekends, without a single mention of my contribution. Watching colleagues nod appreciatively at ideas they didn't know were mine, I felt an odd sense of peace wash over me. My decision was made. On Thursday, I completed all outstanding tasks. My workspace was immaculately organized, every file perfectly arranged, every project status clearly documented. The only item remaining on my otherwise cleared desk was a single folded note. I placed my access badge beside it, took one last look around the office, and walked out quietly at 5 p.m. No one noticed I carried a small box containing my personal items. No one realized it was the last time they would see me in that building. That evening, my phone exploded with notifications. First came confused messages from colleagues, then increasingly urgent texts from Rowe. Finally, a voicemail that began with anger, but ended with something approaching panic. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I prepared for my first day at my new position, one that would fundamentally change the power dynamic between me and the man who had deemed a keynote speech more important than my life. The morning of my first day at Palmer Innovations dawned with a soft golden light filtering through my bedroom curtains. My alarm sounded at 6:30 a.m., but I'd been awake since 5, mentally rehearsing my introduction to the team. This opportunity had emerged unexpectedly, or perhaps it was simply the universe's timing. 2 weeks before my departure from Rowe's company, I'd attended an industry conference. Originally, Rowe was scheduled to present our client satisfaction metrics, but he delegated the task to me last minute, claiming a scheduling conflict. What he meant was a golf game with potential investors. At that conference, I met Constance Palmer, founder and CEO of Palmer Innovations. She approached me after my presentation, impressed by both the metrics and my delivery. "Your analysis shows remarkable insight," she'd said. "Most people track numbers. You understand the people behind them." We exchanged business cards, and I thought little of it. Networking was part of the job. But when I was lying in my hospital bed, a text arrived from her. "Heard you were unwell. My sister's a surgeon at Northeast Memorial. Anything you need?" That simple message of genuine concern from someone who barely knew me highlighted the callousness of Rowe's response. After my recovery, we met for coffee. What I'd planned as a brief catch-up turned into a 3-hour conversation about business philosophy, client relationships, and workplace culture. By the end, she'd offered me a position as Director of Client Strategy, a significant promotion from my previous role. "We need someone who understands that business is ultimately about people," Constance explained. "Technical skills can be taught. Empathy and insight like yours are much rarer." I accepted on the spot, negotiating a start date that would allow me to properly transition my responsibilities at my current job, though not for the benefit of Rowe. My colleagues deserved better than to be left scrambling. Now, as I dressed for my first day, selecting a deep blue suit that complemented my auburn hair, I received the first panicked call from Harriet, our biggest client at my former company. "Merrick, thank goodness you answered. We have the quarterly review with Rowe today, and he's completely unprepared, claims he can't find your notes or background materials." I kept my voice neutral. "I left comprehensive documentation on the shared drive, Harriet. The folder is labeled Harriet Quarterly, Complete Materials." "Well, he's saying it's not there or it's corrupted or something. The meeting's in 3 hours." "That's concerning," I said, applying a touch of lipstick. "Have you considered reaching out to Palmer Innovations? I've heard excellent things about their client services team." A pause. "You know someone there?" "You could say that. I started as their Director of Client Strategy this morning." Another, longer pause. "I didn't know you'd left. It's my first day." I left a detailed transition memo. "Rowe never mentioned it," Harriet said, her voice hardening. "He told us yesterday everything was proceeding as normal." "Interesting," I replied. "I submitted my resignation 2 weeks ago." The conversation ended with Harriet requesting my new contact information and mentioning that perhaps it was time to explore options. I arrived at Palmer Innovations 15 minutes early, greeted by Constance herself. The office culture difference was immediately apparent. People looked up and smiled. Conversations flowed naturally. No one appeared haunted by looming deadlines or unreasonable demands. My new office, with an actual door and window, contained a welcome basket with local treats, a plant, and cards signed by my new team members. The contrast to my former workplace was so stark I almost felt disoriented. As Constance introduced me around, my phone buzzed continuously with messages from Ro. I silenced it without looking. By noon, 3 more clients from my previous company had somehow obtained my new contact information. By 3 o'clock, Ro had called 17 times. I focused instead on meeting my new team, learning about ongoing projects, and beginning to formulate strategies for growth. When I mentioned certain challenges that resonated with my experience at the previous company, Constance listened attentively. We should establish clearer emergency protocols, I suggested during an orientation meeting. Ensure employees have appropriate support systems in place, especially those who've relocated. Constance nodded thoughtfully. Personal experience? You could say that. Proposal on my desk by next week, she said without hesitation. Budget won't be an issue for employee safety. The validation of being heard, truly heard, nearly brought tears to my eyes. At 5 o'clock, as I was organizing my new workspace, Constance knocked on my doorframe. Dinner? First day tradition. Teams heading to Lily's around the corner. In my previous position, I'd worked until 8 most nights. The concept of a team dinner to welcome a new member was completely foreign. I'd love to, I replied, gathering my things. As we walked out together, my phone rang again. Ro's number. This time, I answered and put it on speaker so Constance could hear. Merrick, where the hell are you? Harriet's threatening to pull her account. What did you say to her? Hello, Ro. I'm leaving my office with my new CEO. It's my first day at Palmer Innovations. Silence. I left a detailed note explaining my departure. I'm surprised you're calling now, considering you couldn't be bothered to leave your keynote when I was rushed into emergency surgery. Constance's eyebrows shot up, but she remained silent. That's completely different, Ro sputtered. That was a critical company event. You've compromised client relationships. You're violating your contract. Actually, I've reviewed my contract thoroughly with legal counsel. There's no non-compete clause that prevents me from accepting this position, and I've maintained all confidentiality requirements. As for client relationships, I simply answered truthfully when they called me directly. You need to fix this, he demanded. Call Harriet back. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. No, Ro. I don't work for you anymore. This is the consequence of your choices. Remember when the nurse called to tell you I needed emergency surgery, and you said you couldn't leave the retreat? Well, I couldn't stay at a company where employees are valued less than presentations. I ended the call as Constance held the door for me. Emergency surgery? She asked quietly as we walked. Intestinal rupture. Nearly died. He never visited. Told the nurse to email updates because calls were inconvenient. Constance stopped walking. That's not just poor management. That's inhuman. Hence my current employment status, I said with a small smile. Well, his loss is definitely our gain, she replied, but her expression had hardened. Though I suspect he hasn't realized the full extent of his loss yet. She was right. He hadn't, but he would soon. The next morning, my former colleagues began reaching out, first Pax, then others. Word had spread about my departure, and the office was in chaos. Ro had apparently called an emergency meeting, raging about loyalty and betrayal while desperately trying to placate Harriet and other major clients. He keeps saying you sabotaged him, Pax reported, but Harriet's team found your transition documents exactly where you said they'd be. They were comprehensive and perfectly organized. It's making him look worse. I felt a momentary twinge of doubt. Was I being vindictive? Had I crossed a line? Then Pax added, Oh, and he's saying your medical emergency wasn't that serious and you're being dramatic about the whole thing. My doubt evaporated. By the end of my first week at Palmer, 7 former colleagues had applied for open positions. 2 had been hired. 3 major clients had requested meetings with me to discuss their options. The Industry Standards Committee had launched an investigation into workplace safety practices, using my former company as a case study. Ro's world was unraveling thread by thread, not because I was actively pulling, but because once the first thread came loose, the structural weaknesses in his leadership became impossible to ignore. Then came the moment I hadn't anticipated, doubt from an unexpected source. My mother called on Sunday evening. "Merrick, honey, I'm worried about you. Your former boss called me. My blood ran cold." "He what?" "Said you've been making false accusations, that you abandoned clients and violated company policies. He wanted me to talk some sense into you." "Mom, how did he even get your number?" "Said he found it in your emergency contact update forms. Asked if I knew how serious your surgery really was, implied you'd exaggerated." The violation of privacy was stunning, the manipulation even worse. "Mom, I nearly died. The doctor can confirm that, and I left everything properly documented. He's desperate because clients are leaving." She sighed. "I believe you, honey, but he seemed so concerned about your professional reputation. Said he could still smooth things over if you'd reconsider." For the first time since my plan began unfolding, I felt a flicker of fear. Ro was becoming unpredictable. Desperate people make dangerous choices. "Mom, please block his number. What he's doing isn't normal or professional." Thing. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, watching shadows lengthen across the floor as evening fell. Had I underestimated Ro? Would he escalate further? Had I put my family at risk by opposing him? The next morning, I arrived at Palmer to find Constance waiting by my office. "We need to talk," she said, her expression grave. "Your former employer reached out to me directly." My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "He implied you stole proprietary information, suggested we could face legal action for hiring you, claimed you were under performance review before leaving." "None of that is true," I said, hands trembling slightly. "I can prove it." "I know," Constance replied calmly. His desperation was transparent. "But I wanted you to know he's escalating. This isn't just about lost clients anymore. He's trying to damage your reputation. What should we do?" "Not we. The company has already responded through legal channels. This is about what you want to do. His behavior toward you specifically has crossed several lines." I considered my options carefully. Confrontation wasn't my natural inclination. I preferred systems and solutions to direct conflict. But sometimes, the only way forward is through. "I need to end this definitively," I said finally. "Not just for me, but for everyone still working there." Constance nodded. "Whatever you need, you have our full support." That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first to a labor attorney who specialized in workplace harassment, the second to the board member who had personally thanked me for my work on the company retreat, unaware that Ro had been contacted during my medical emergency. The third to Harriet, who had been waiting for exactly this conversation. The pieces were in place. Now I just needed to wait for the right moment, which came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Ro appeared in the Palmer Innovations lobby, demanding to see me. Security called up, and against Constance's advice, I agreed to meet him in a conference room, with security cameras running and a witness present. He looked disheveled, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his tie hung slightly askew. "You've gone too far," he said the moment I entered. "Harriet is taking her entire portfolio to Palmer. Do you have any idea what that means for the company, for the people who work there?" "I'm aware," I replied calmly, "just as I was aware of what it meant when you chose not to come to the hospital when I was dying." "You weren't dying," he scoffed. "It was a routine procedure. My medical records indicate otherwise. The surgeon said if I'd arrived an hour later, I likely wouldn't have survived." He waved dismissively. "Everyone exaggerates in hospitals. It's about billing." "Is that what you told yourself to justify abandoning an employee in crisis? That it was probably exaggerated?" I was handling a critical company event, an event I organized, using materials I created, presenting ideas I developed. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What do you want? Money? A recommendation? Name it so we can end this nonsense." I smiled then. Not the professional smile I'd worn for years, but something genuine and a little sad. What I want isn't something you can give me now, Ro. I wanted basic human decency when I needed it most. I wanted acknowledgement for my contributions. I wanted a workplace that valued people over presentations. So this is revenge, he said bitterly. Destroying everything I've built because your feelings were hurt. No, I replied. This is consequence. Everything happening now is the direct result of how you've treated people. I didn't tell Harriet to leave. She made that decision after seeing how you handled my departure and learning how you responded to my emergency. I stood up. I didn't destroy anything, Ro. I simply stepped aside and allowed your true leadership to be visible without me covering the gaps. You'll regret this, he threatened, rising as well. I'll make sure everyone in the industry knows what you did. Please do, I said calmly. Tell them exactly what happened. How your employee collapsed during a presentation. How you refused to leave a company retreat when informed she needed emergency surgery. How you never visited during her 8-day hospital stay. How you expected her to immediately resume full workload upon return. How you took credit for her work repeatedly. Please, share all those details widely. The color drained from his face as he realized the implications. Oh, and one more thing, I added, retrieving an envelope from my bag. This arrived this morning. The Industry Standards Committee has completed their initial review of workplace safety practices at your company. They've recommended a complete overhaul of emergency protocols and leadership training. The board has already voted to implement all recommendations. The board can't. They already did. Apparently, when the committee shared their findings, including testimony from multiple employees about similar experiences, the board realized the company faces significant liability risks under your leadership. His face contorted with rage. You planned this. All of it. From the moment you left that note. No, Ro. You planned it the moment you decided a keynote speech was more important than an employee's life. I simply ensured the consequences found their way home. As he stormed out, Constance entered, having watched from the adjacent room. That's one of the most professional takedowns I've ever witnessed, she said with quiet admiration. 3 days later, I received an email from Pax. Ro had been placed on administrative leave, pending a comprehensive review of management practices. The board had appointed an interim director with a background in organizational psychology and workplace culture transformation. The company retreat was canceled that year. Its budget diverted to establishing proper medical response protocols and comprehensive staff wellness programs. An anonymous tip line had been established for reporting workplace concerns without fear of retaliation. Harriet's account transition to Palmer Innovations proceeded smoothly, largely because I had indeed left impeccable documentation of all processes and relationships. 5 more clients followed within the month. As for me, my new role at Palmer thrived. The emergency protocol proposal I submitted became a model adopted by several other companies in our industry. When a colleague experienced a family emergency during an important client presentation, Constance herself stepped in to cover, while arranging immediate support. Sometimes I wonder if my actions were too harsh, if Ro deserved the professional reckoning that followed. Then I remember lying alone in pre-op, signing my own consent forms, while knowing that no one was coming to support me during the most frightening moment of my life. The most satisfying revenge isn't about causing harm, but about redirecting the flow of consequences. It's about building something healthier, while allowing natural justice to find those who revealed their true priorities when you needed them most. My hand occasionally drifts to the scar on my abdomen, a permanent reminder that some lessons are carved into us, that we teach people how to treat us by what we accept, that sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, but when you finally decide to walk away. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your own experiences with workplace loyalty, the good and the bad. Remember that your worth isn't measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice, but by recognizing when you deserve better. No job should cost you your health or humanity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply place a note on your desk and walk away.